The princess faced Duke Hugo, her voice steady despite the tension that thickened the air between them. "So may I add my own terms to this marriage as well?" she inquired, seeking clarity on her position in this arrangement. "Of course," Hugo responded promptly, his tone firm and devoid of any warmth. "However, if we do not sign the contract today, consider the whole thing off," he added, his words carrying an unmistakable threat. "Why?" Princess Lucia couldn't help but ask, her curiosity piqued by his insistence. She wanted to understand the reason behind his ultimatum. Duke Hugo's response was cold and calculated. "The future is uncertain with too many variables. Delaying the decision only adds to the unpredictability," he explained, though his words felt more like a veiled warning. Lucia fell silent, taken aback by his strict demeanor. She pondered over his words, recognizing the rigid boundaries he set. Gathering her courage, she decided to probe deeper into his guarded persona. "May I ask you something?" she ventured, her voice betraying none of the turmoil within. "Why do you hate a woman's love?" The question hung in the air, bold and unflinching. The silence that followed was profound, stretching on as seconds turned into minutes. Lucia began to regret her question, fearing she had reopened old wounds. The thought that she might have inadvertently caused him pain made her uneasy, her earlier bravado fading. Duke Hugo, caught off guard by her question, was not surprised by the inquiry itself but by her nervous attitude. He wondered what she was thinking about now. Lucia, interpreting his silence as discomfort, feared she had overstepped. "Have I asked you a question you cannot answer?" she ventured, breaking the silence that had settled between them. Duke Hugo finally spoke, his voice low. "No one has ever dared to ask me that before." "Your question took me by surprise," he admitted, revealing a glimpse of his vulnerability. Lucia listened intently to Duke Hugo, his expression unchanged as he voiced his thoughts. "Although I don't despise your question," he began, his voice calm and measured, "I believe a woman's love should be reciprocated. And since I cannot return such affection, I prefer not to be loved at all." His words were direct, leaving no room for misinterpretation. Lucia was visibly taken aback by his admission. To her, his stance seemed not born of heartbreak, but of sheer self-interest. Internally she criticized him, deeming him selfish and in need of a lesson in humility. She mused silently, a hint of disappointment lacing her thoughts. "Well, I guess a man who has everything will never have to experience something like that," she concluded, a bit of resentment seeping into her silent judgment. Brushing aside her internal critique, Lucia gathered her resolve and addressed Duke Hugo with newfound determination. "I understand," she said, her voice strong and clear. "But I only need your word, Your Excellency. Swear upon your family's honor." Her request piqued his interest, her serious demeanor contrasting with the playful spark in her eyes. "My family's honor? That indeed holds more weight than any contract. What is it you request?" Hugo asked, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth, intrigued by her audacity. Lucia outlined her conditions earnestly. "There are 2 conditions. First, promise me there will be no abuse, neither physical nor verbal," she stated, her tone serious. "Her Royal Highness believes that he was saying, and she quickly added that she meant no offense by this request, preempting any misinterpretation. Before she could elaborate further, Duke Hugo interjected, curious about her second condition. Lucia hesitated for a moment, her next words carrying a weight of emotional risk. "Secondly, while I will try my best, the heart sometimes acts beyond our control. If I should find myself unable to keep my heart from you, then send me a rose," she said, her expression a mix of resolve and apprehension. "A rose?" Duke Hugo repeated, his initial confusion giving way to deep contemplation. Her request struck a chord, reminding him of something deeply personal. How could she have known about the rose, he wondered, unaware of Lucia's dream in which a rose symbolized the end of their relationship. Duke Hugo was momentarily taken aback by Lucia's requests. Was she eavesdropping? But this woman seems hardly to grasp the concept of a contract, he pondered silently, recognizing that taking advantage of Lucia's naivety was out of the question. Your Highness, might I suggest you consider more pragmatic terms? Duke Hugo proposed, his tone gentle yet firm. I fear you underestimate the significance of the documents you're about to sign. Lucia, now contemplative, inquired if he referred to financial conditions. Yes, he affirmed. Her response, however, surprised him. But as a duchess, I wouldn't need to worry about living costs, right? I don't seek wealth beyond that, she reasoned, her simplicity and practicality catching Duke Hugo off guard. What sort of princess concerns herself with the cost of living, he wondered, genuinely intrigued by the workings of her mind. He openly accepted her first condition but sought clarity on the second. It holds personal significance, Lucia explained, her conviction shining through. She elaborated on her perspective that while material wealth was necessary to a degree, it was the immaterial aspects of life that truly mattered. Being destitute is miserable, but once you have enough to live comfortably, having more doesn't significantly alter your happiness, she shared with him. Duke Hugo, still processing her words, couldn't help but question her age again, finding her wisdom beyond her years. Did you not say you were 18? He asked, to which she confirmed. Your outlook is unusually mature for someone so young. I'm puzzled by where you've acquired such a philosophy, he admitted, a mix of curiosity and admiration in his tone. Lucia simply smiled, reiterating her terms and expressing her belief that they were not overly demanding. Duke Hugo found himself taken aback by the simplicity and sincerity of her requests. Difficult? On the contrary, they're disarmingly straightforward, he thought, a newfound respect for Lucia stirring within him. All right, I understand and agree to your terms, Duke Hugo conceded, reaching for his ink and pen with a sense of resolve, leaving her in shock. Lucia's reaction was one of pure delight, her joy evident as she prepared to sign the contract. Yes, she uttered, her voice carrying a mixture of relief and happiness, as she took a significant step towards a future that, until moments ago, seemed fraught with uncertainties. The agreement they reached, founded on respect and understanding, marked the beginning of a new chapter for both. Lucia and Duke Hugo found themselves at the peculiar juncture of acknowledging their engagement. Duke Hugo, pragmatic in his approach, suggested the idea of notarization, a notion promptly dismissed by Lucia, leaving him speechless. Yes, we are engaged to be married, Lucia affirmed, contemplating the newfound status of being Duke Hugo Taran's fiancée. Observing Lucia's sudden reticence, Duke Hugo probed into her character, questioning whether she sought honor above all else. With a practical directive, he advised her to depart before nightfall, citing her lack of permission to stay overnight at his castle. As Lucia pondered the situation, she perceived a softening in Duke Hugo's tone, a subtle shift that fueled her daydreams. However, the atmosphere changed abruptly when Duke Hugo accused Lucia of assuming the guise of a housemaid, departing the palace under the pretense of having permission letters. His choice of words left Lucia stunned as he ordered her not to ever do that again, prompting her to question the sudden change in his demeanor. Why are you talking to me like this? She wondered, grappling with the perceived rudeness. How should I put it? She thought while groaning. Unapologetically, Duke Hugo informed Lucia that he refrained from formalities with his woman, a declaration that both surprised and embarrassed her. As he casually referred to her as such, Lucia blushed, taken aback. Stuttering, she questioned when she had become His Excellency's woman, prompting Duke Hugo to remind her of their agreement to marry. Expressing uncertainty about the future, Lucia reminded the Duke that they were not yet married, implying that their engagement didn't guarantee the certainty of a union. Duke Hugo, in response, queried her understanding of the implications of engagement, asserting the permanence of such commitments within the Taran family. This revelation left Lucia stunned, introducing an unexpected layer of complexity to their burgeoning relationship. Why can't you speak more courteously to your fiancé? Is that also tradition? Lucia demanded, seeking clarity from Duke Hugo. His response was straightforward, no, that is just me. This revelation left Lucia perplexed, realizing that she couldn't easily decipher Duke Hugo's character. Initially frightening, he now appeared enigmatic, perhaps even a philanderer, she mused. Lucia grappled with questions about the Duke's manners, emotions, and rationality, finding herself unable to categorize him definitively. Maintaining his stance on Lucia's unauthorized departures with permission letters, Duke Hugo urged her to respond to his inquiries. With a serious expression he asked, "Are you going to answer me?" Lucia, exhibiting newfound boldness, questioned what he would do if she did. Duke Hugo's cryptic response, "Try me and see," as she smiled, knowing her first impression was not wrong, prompted Lucia to classify him as someone who intimidates by default, cautioning herself against crossing such individuals. Seeking a semblance of understanding, Lucia pleaded to see someone one more time. In deep thought, Duke Hugo, inquisitive yet composed, posed a counter-question, "And if you do, what will you say?" To Lucia's surprise, Duke Hugo seemed aware of her connection with Norman, referring to her as a princess, leaving her stunned as she thought, he already knows about Norman. Blushing at his endearment, Lucia expressed her desire to bid farewell as Norman is important to her. Duke Hugo, aiming to dispel any misconceptions, clarified that he wasn't forbidding her from seeing Norman again. "This engagement is a secret," Duke Hugo confided in Lucia, expressing his desire to avoid any potential scandal. Lucia, filled with joy, seized the opportunity to inquire if it would be acceptable to see Norman after their marriage. Duke Hugo, conceding to her enthusiasm, reluctantly agreed, cautioning her not to disclose the contractual arrangement. Overjoyed by the partial victory, Lucia praised Duke Hugo's consideration. However, Duke Hugo, bemused by the apparent shift in perception, reminded Lucia of her earlier judgment, questioning, "Last time you treated me like a philanderer, and now I'm considerate? Just how awful of a person do you think I am?" Caught off guard, Lucia clarified that her words were not meant to be taken that way, her sudden sadness evident. Duke Hugo, observing her, recognized that Lucia might not be well acquainted with his multifaceted character. Despite being rumored as a man with different sides, even considered a monster, he acknowledged that Lucia's perception would likely change when she inevitably encountered such rumors. Reflecting to himself, Duke Hugo anticipated that she might regret her current sentiments in the face of the truths that awaited her. In this unfolding engagement, the nuanced interactions between Lucia and Duke Hugo reveal layers of complexity, setting the stage for the challenges and revelations that may shape their relationship in the days to come. We are experiencing delightful weather nowadays. I hope this letter finds you in good spirits. I regret having to bid you farewell through a letter, but rest assured there is no cause for concern. I am hale and hearty, attending to important matters that will keep me away for a while. Lucia took a moment to pen down her thoughts, expressing her reassurance to Norman and assuring her of her well-being. "Please don't worry about me," she wrote, "our paths will cross again. Our friendship, solidified over time, is for life, and I am confident it will endure indefinitely." Concerned about Norman's disrupted sleep schedule, Lucia added a gentle reminder for her to prioritize her health. "Until then, take care of yourself." As she concluded the letter, she pondered on how to deliver it to Norman. Holding the letter close, she anticipated that Duke Hugo might arrange for its safe passage. 5 days after the meeting at the Duke's Hugo Manor, Lucia knew she wouldn't be able to see Norman until after the impending wedding. Acknowledging this, she decided to send word to her through a letter to alleviate any worries. Contemplating whether Norman would mind if Duke Hugo's messenger read the contents, Lucia pondered on the uncertainty of the marriage date. "I wonder when the wedding will take place," she mused, unsure if it would be in half a year or a full one. The anticipation of reuniting with Norman weighed on her mind, and she couldn't help but miss her deeply. As she rocked her chair, lost in thought, Lucia accidentally tipped it backward, letting out a surprised exclamation before landing on her back. "Ouch," she sighed. Despite the discomfort from the fall, Lucia lay on the ground, contemplating her next move. Boredom set in, prompting her to decide on doing some laundry. "I should do some laundry," Lucia finally uttered, lifting herself up. She stepped on her clothes in the laundry bucket and, lifting her dress, began to wash it vigorously. The repetitive motion seemed to be a welcome distraction. "Laundry is great for keeping my mind off things," she thought. What's done is done, no use worrying about it. I'll just concentrate on my chores, she said to herself. However, her newfound focus was abruptly interrupted by a stern inquiry from a court lady who had seemingly appeared out of nowhere. Lucia was taken aback by the sudden presence of this unfamiliar maid, unaware of her surroundings. Are you a girl that works here? The court lady barked at Lucia, not recognizing her. Lucia, still inside the laundry bucket, was puzzled. A court lady? What is a court lady doing here, she thought, refraining from speaking. Why are you not answering me? You seem like you work here, but I have not seen you before. Is the princess in? The court lady pressed further. Lucia, contemplating the situation, remained silent, wondering why the woman was seeking her out. She stopped doing the laundry as she thought, but what do I tell her in this situation? As she definitely doesn't look the princess part. Lucia overheard the court lady's demand for a response. Answer me this minute, or are you unable to speak? The court lady insisted. Lucia, still inside the laundry bucket, hesitated, unsure of how to handle the situation. There is a guest here to see the princess, lead me to her, the court lady declared. Lucia, caught off guard, thought, there is no one who would come see me here. A guest? I think she's at the wrong place. In the midst of her mundane task, Lucia found herself entangled in an unexpected encounter, uncertain about how to proceed. I did not know they had added laundry to a lady's education, Duke Hugo remarked with a hint of annoyance as he entered the scene, observing his fiancée engaged in the unexpected task. He looked displeased. Duke Hugo, she thought. A servant of the palace does not even know the face of the princess. How incompetent, Duke Hugo stated, directing his disapproval toward the court lady. Turning to Lucia, he quipped, that's on you for having such a strange hobby, your royal highness. Lucia felt a sudden surge of fear. What is he doing here, she thought to herself. Stuttering a greeting, she asked Duke Hugo. Oh, hello. What brings you here? Duke Hugo, unimpressed with the current setting, suggested, why don't you step out of there so we can talk? Lucia, realizing her laundry endeavor was a peculiar situation, blushed slightly. Wait a moment, she said, attempting to leave the laundry bucket. However, in the process she tripped and fell to the ground. Duke Hugo, standing in front of her, watched curiously as Lucia struggled. Embarrassed, she contemplated her predicament. I cannot get up, maybe I'll pretend to be dead, she thought, still lying on the ground. Frustrated with herself, she questioned, why am I falling down so much today? Offering a helping hand, Duke Hugo reached out to Lucia. Looking up, she held his arm, allowing him to pull her from the ground. Thank you, Lucia expressed her gratitude for his assistance, relieved to be back on her feet. Observing that Lucia was on her bare feet, Duke Hugo gently held her by the waist and lifted her up, carrying her in his arms. Lucia experienced a rush of different emotions at once. Concerned about getting soap on him due to her wet laundry state, she voiced her worry to Duke Hugo. However, he seemed unfazed, assuring her, let's go inside the manor. Lucia, short of words, blushed as Duke Hugo smirked, carrying her past the court lady who remained a silent witness to the scene. Upon reaching Lucia's room, they found maids waiting to assist her in changing her attire. Lucia was surprised at the sudden attention, realizing that they now recognized her as an important guest. She pondered when the maids had arrived, musing that perhaps they were trying to alleviate some guilt for not attending to her sooner. I will be right back, Lucia informed Duke Hugo as the maids led her to change her attire. Resolved not to make an issue out of the maid's neglect, she decided not to protest the maid's sudden diligence. She considered her meeting with Duke Hugo the primary focus. As she changed her attire, Lucia contemplated the reason behind Duke Hugo's unexpected visit. However, she couldn't shake the question of why he had come in person rather than sending a letter or a servant to see her. Now changed, she walked to the parlor to meet Duke Hugo, still pondering his purpose for being there and wondering about the discussions that lay ahead as he just looked at her. The maid carefully poured tea into delicate cups as the couples settled into their seats, facing each other. Lucia couldn't help but marvel at their resourcefulness. The tea was finer than any she had had in her palace, and she wondered how they had acquired it so quickly. Observing Duke Hugo sipping his tea, Lucia lifted her own cup, savoring the anticipation of the tea prepared by a diligent handmaiden. As Duke Hugo inquired about her well-being, Lucia couldn't help but notice his genuine interest in her health. "Oh yes," Lucia responded with a smile. "He treats me courteously when others are around," she mused inwardly, giggling to herself. Duke Hugo, seemingly oblivious to the unintentional humor, remarked, "I saw that you are healthy, at least." Lucia found it amusing how he unintentionally lightened the mood. Switching the topic, Duke Hugo leaned in and spoke in a more serious tone, "Anyway, I have something important to discuss. Please ask the court ladies to leave and keep only your trusted handmaidens." Lucia caught the gravity of his request. "Oh," she exclaimed, realizing the significance. "I don't have handmaidens at the moment," she confessed. Duke Hugo appeared puzzled. "Are they all out?" he inquired after Lucia had instructed every handmaiden to leave, granting them the privacy they needed. Lucia nodded in confirmation. Without further delay, Duke Hugo proposed, "If it's all right with you, would you like to go for a walk with me?" Lucia agreed, and together they stepped outside into the peaceful, beautiful weather. During their stroll, Duke Hugo couldn't help but question Lucia about her involvement in the handmaiden's duties and her freedom to move in and out of the palace with a permission letter. As they continued their conversation, the atmosphere remained calm, with no need for embellishments. "Do you mistake yourself for a handmaiden?" Duke Hugo inquired as they strolled through the palace grounds. "There is no one else to do it," Lucia responded matter-of-factly. Curious, Duke Hugo probed further, "What do the handmaidens do?" Lucia somewhat shyly admitted, The truth is I live here by myself." Perplexed, Duke Hugo halted their walk, turning to look at Lucia. "You don't have handmaidens?" he asked, seeking confirmation. "No," Lucia replied simply. "You live alone in this side palace?" Duke Hugo sought clarification once more. "Yes," Lucia affirmed. "The cooking? The cleaning? All done by yourself?" Duke Hugo's surprise and a hint of anger were evident. "Yes," Lucia said, smiling. "It's not that difficult. I don't look after anyone else, just myself." Proud of her independence, Lucia shared, "Since when?" It's been a few years," Lucia revealed. "Astonishing," Duke Hugo remarked, struggling to comprehend the situation. As they continued their walk, he mulled over Fabian's report, realizing that the absence of residing handmaidens meant exactly what Lucia was confessing. "I thought it meant that she was a picky person who frequently brought in new handmaidens. I didn't imagine she actually had none. Though she is a princess without much influence, she is royalty, and she must be treated as royalty, but she has been a royal living on her own this whole time," he thought. Duke Hugo couldn't find words. Recalling the first day he saw Lucia at the banquet hall, he remembered her wearing only a plain dress without any accessories, a stark contrast to the elaborate attire others wore during such festivities. He hadn't imagined that Lucia, despite her royal status, had been living on her own. Silent and contemplative, Duke Hugo realized the significance of Lucia's actions. Her solo proposal, the seemingly sloppy terms of the contract, the look in her eyes when she spoke to him, and the desperation in her eyes all fell into place. "Now it all makes sense," Duke Hugo concluded, understanding the challenges Lucia had faced on her own. Though Lucia may not have outwardly shown it, there was likely an undercurrent of misery beneath her composed exterior. A forgotten princess living in solitude within a remote part of the palace. Facing Duke Hugo, Lucia responded to his query, "What's the important thing you wanted to talk about?" "I have received permission from His Majesty to marry you this morning," Duke Hugo disclosed. "I'll inform you of the exact date when it's set. It will be in less than a month." "So soon?" she thought. "You handle things very quickly," Lucia exclaimed, surprised by the swift development. As Duke Hugo walked ahead, he addressed the matter of her handmaidens. "I'll look into it," he assured her. "Please don't." They will be held responsible regardless. If you get involved, the punishment will be more severe. I don't want that, Lucia pleaded with Duke Hugo. You are being needlessly forgiving, he remarked. Perhaps, but I liked being alone. I felt free, and in the end, it's good for your highness too, Lucia explained. For me? Duke Hugo asked in disbelief. This marriage, I'm guessing you were at least satisfied with it to move so quickly? If I were a well-behaved princess locked up in a palace, I would not have dreamed of asking you to marry me, Lucia confessed with a smile. Realizing the validity of her point, Duke Hugo turned and kissed Lucia. Startled, she exclaimed, almost yelling, but covered her mouth, blushing from the unexpected gesture. Backing away, Duke Hugo finally acknowledged to himself that Lucia was strong and would make a good lady of the house, smiling at the thought. Duke Hugo strolled along the estate grounds, sharing his plans with Lucia, who walked behind him. I'm planning to go north as soon as we get married and stay there for a while, he mentioned casually. Oh yes, north, Lucia replied quietly to herself. Duke Taran's territory is in the north. Its lands are vast and barren but are always at war. That's where I will be going, Lucia thought to herself, feeling a bit uneasy about the prospect. Duke Hugo brought up the topic of their wedding, proposing an informal ceremony. What do you think? He inquired, seeking Lucia's opinion. Yes. That sounds good. Lucia responded with enthusiasm. She didn't want her father, whom she had never seen before, to walk her down the aisle. The only person she wanted to attend her wedding was Norman, a commoner who wouldn't be able to make it. Oh! Your Excellency, I have a favor to ask of you, Lucia said, a hint of nervousness in her voice. She handed Duke Hugo a letter she had prepared for Norman, explaining, I just need you to give this to the novelist. Duke Hugo, taking the letter, asked, So I just need to give this letter to the novelist? Yes. Lucia confirmed. Though it seemed like a small favor, she was evidently anxious about it. Thank you for doing this for me, Your Excellency. You are much nicer than I thought, Lucia said excitedly. Reflecting on her choice of words, Lucia quickly added, I mean, you are as nice as I thought. She apologized quickly, realizing she might have come across the wrong way. She must have thought I am some impudent villain or something, Duke Hugo thought inwardly. Well, at least she isn't scared of me, he concluded, leaving Lucia to wonder why she had said what she said. I must get going, Duke Hugo informed Lucia. Oh yes, she replied. After I go back, there will be many guests coming to see you. Word will quickly spread that I was here. People seeking me will take an interest in you. So don't go talking around and stay put. And don't just meet anyone coming to see you, Duke Hugo warned Lucia with a stern expression. Lucia wondered why the Duke expressed everything so bluntly. You should move elsewhere, Duke Hugo continued. It's too secluded here and not secure. It won't take long to move elsewhere. Since I came by, His Majesty will take care of it himself, he assured Lucia once more. Yes, all right, Lucia said with a hint of sadness. She kept silent, remembering her father, the king. She did not ask about him, surprising Duke Hugo. He recalled his meeting with the king when he requested Lucia's hand in marriage. You want to marry my 16th daughter? The king asked before bursting into laughter. She is very precious to me, he added after he finished laughing. So the bride price will be quite expensive, the king informed Duke Hugo. Throughout their conversation, the king struggled to recall Lucia's name, Vivian. The king's staff were likely still searching to discover who Lucia was. Yet here she was looking happy beside him. Anything else? Lucia asked. Having nothing else to discuss as he grins, Duke Hugo excused himself from Lucia to attend to other matters in his manor. Back at his palace, Fabian shouted, Honestly, where have you been? I told you not to go out without us. Is it that hard to just tell us where you are going? Fabian nagged Duke Hugo. Duke Hugo sat down in silence, choosing not to answer any of Fabian's questions. Bowing respectfully, Fabian expressed that if Duke Hugo had informed him of his plans, he would have gladly escorted him. Duke Hugo calmly informed him that he had been at the palace. "What?" Fabian exclaimed in surprise. Despite the numerous issues that arose since Duke Hugo became close to the crown prince, who was considered an enemy, Duke Hugo had still chosen to go to the palace alone. Fabian couldn't fathom everything he had just heard. "Did you go see the crown prince?" Fabian asked, his tone a mix of amusement and anger. Duke Hugo, lost in thought, replied, "Oh, I should have while I was there." Puzzled by the Duke's words, Fabian interjected, "If you didn't go see the crown prince, what were you?" Before Fabian could inquire further about Duke Hugo's visit to the palace, Duke Hugo interrupted him, revealing that he was getting married. "I went to seek permission from His Majesty," he added. Fabian, unable to believe his ears, knew he couldn't yell at the Duke as he attempted to calm himself. Trembling, he inquired, "With the princess?" "Yes, within a month," Duke Hugo confirmed. Fabian was bewildered. "Don't send word home, I don't want them all coming here." "I'm heading north right after the wedding," Duke Hugo informed Fabian. "We have an island with a mine, right? Use that for the bride price." Duke Hugo instructed him to use the Duke Taran's Island, located in the Saint Islands, which had a diamond mine. "Your Highness, that is way too much," Fabian exclaimed. "I've already made the deal with the king," Duke Hugo informed Fabian. "I'm not having a big wedding, we will have an informal one," he revealed. A duke and a princess getting married without a formal wedding? It's not even war times and he's having an informal wedding. Fabian pondered, feeling a strange unease about everything he had heard. Knowing that the Taran land bordered a troublesome savage tribe, leading to constant instability and endless battles, Fabian considered the possibility that Duke Hugo might use this as an excuse for urgency in the lands. It can't be, Fabian thought. Is something really going on in the lands? He questioned Duke Hugo, who wore a subtle grin. "I'll give you some errands to take care of. I don't want to be bothered, so let's keep this quiet," Duke Hugo instructed Fabian. "Yes, Your Excellency," Fabian replied, uncertain about what to do next. Fabian couldn't help but reflect on everything Duke Hugo had shared. The insistence on an informal wedding when there was no trouble in the territory led Fabian to believe that the Duke found a formal wedding too troublesome. A formal wedding would take an entire day. The Duke steps all over others without a second thought, completely lacking any consideration or humanity. He is self-righteous, and there is no one as arrogant as him. That is the kind of man the Duke is, Fabian acknowledged within himself. The owner of the Taran family was indeed a dictator. He is probably only getting married because he needs the registration. Poor princess, Fabian mused as he walked down the hallway. Considering that any princess who marries such a selfish and heartless man like Duke Hugo might turn to alcohol or try to fill the emptiness with luxuries and vanity, Fabian pondered. He was certain that no matter how miserable the Duchess would be, Duke Hugo would pay her no attention. Fabian was convinced of this reality. The following morning there was a gentle knock at her door. The door creaked open, revealing a handmaiden who peered inside and greeted her with surprise. "Oh, you are already up," the handmaiden exclaimed upon finding Lucia standing by the window. "Princess, the princess seems very diligent," she added with respect, proceeding to brush Lucia's hair. Observing Lucia's diligence, the handmaiden commented on her early wakefulness. "You are always up before I come to wake you up," she remarked, smiling. Lucia, choosing to remain silent, acknowledged the handmaiden's words with a thoughtful nod. The handmaiden then offered to help Lucia get dressed, and the princess acquiesced. During the dressing process, Lucia couldn't shake the feeling of unease. "These helping hands, I can't get used to them," she thought. The luxurious dresses, extravagant meals, and the absence of daily chores felt like a stark departure from her previous routines. She contemplated the sudden changes that occurred since Duke Hugo's visit, leading to her relocation to another residence. As she explored her new palace, named the Rose Palace, Lucia expressed admiration for its grandeur. However, the vastness of the palace seemed to accentuate its emptiness. The Rose Palace, traditionally bestowed upon women who earned the king's love, awaited its intended purpose. Running her hands through some barren rose bushes, Lucia learned about the palace's gardens, imagining the beauty they would exhibit in late spring. Regretfully, she acknowledged that she might miss witnessing the roses in full bloom. Returning to her quarters, Lucia indulged in some tea when a butler interrupted her solitude. "Princess," he addressed her, "His Majesty would like to see you." Confused by her father's sudden summons, Lucia wondered about his motives. "Why would he suddenly want to see me?" she pondered. "He's never asked for me once in his life," she mused inwardly. The butler delivered the message with a friendly demeanor, explaining that the king was unwell and wished for Lucia's immediate visit. Surprised by the sudden request, Lucia hesitated. Instead of becoming upset with her father, she politely instructed the butler to convey her wishes for his swift recovery. "Tell His Majesty that I wish for his speedy recovery," Lucia stated, maintaining a composed demeanor. The butler, bewildered by her response, sought clarification. "Pardon?" he asked. Lucia, with a feigned smile, explained that she, too, was unwell and unable to go out. The butler stammered, unsure of how to proceed. "You may go," Lucia dismissed him, still masking her true feelings behind a polite smile. Alone again, Lucia pondered her father's intentions. She realized that he didn't want to see her as his daughter, rather, he sought the presence of Duke Taran's fiancée. Sipping her tea, Lucia acknowledged the perceived importance of being Duke Taran's betrothed. Instead of becoming upset with her father, she decided not to seek him out either, expressing her silent defiance. Meanwhile, in a separate scenario, the Crown Prince confronted Duke Hugo, expressing concern about the latter's decision to leave for the northern lands. The Crown Prince emphasized the danger he faced, with people seeking retribution. Duke Hugo assured him of a proper guard for protection, but the Crown Prince, desperate for assistance, pleaded with him to stay. Despite the plea, Duke Hugo remained steadfast in his decision to leave, downplaying the importance of his presence. The Crown Prince argued that Duke Hugo's mere presence deterred potential threats. Duke Hugo questioned whether that was truly beneficial, but the Crown Prince, worried about post-war reprisals, insisted on the necessity of Duke Hugo's support. In a tense conversation, the Crown Prince confronted Duke Hugo about the ongoing struggles for the spoils of war. The Duke vehemently declared the spoils to be exclusively his, sparking a heated exchange with the Crown Prince. Duke Hugo contested the Crown Prince's ownership, stating that what belonged to him was rightfully his. The Crown Prince, maintaining a confident smile, declared that everything belonging to Duke Hugo was, in essence, his own. Calmly, Duke Hugo informed the Crown Prince of his plan to return in 2 years. Frustrated, the Crown Prince demanded a shorter duration, but Duke Hugo stood firm on his decision, possibly less if the crown passed to him during that time. As Duke Hugo prepared to leave, he dropped the bombshell of his impending wedding the next day, describing it as an informal ceremony so the Crown Prince doesn't need to attend. The revelation that he was marrying a princess left the Crown Prince in shock and confusion. As Duke Hugo exited the room with a sharp farewell, the bewildered Crown Prince was left grappling with the unexpected news. "Why am I hearing that Duke Taran is getting married from him, just 1 day before the event?" the prince said angrily. He immediately commanded his guards to investigate the matter, expressing his surprise and frustration. The Crown Prince, puzzled by Duke Hugo's choice of a princess, even contemplated introducing him to his own sister. In another scene, Lucia found herself unable to sleep on the eve of her wedding. "I can't sleep," she said, sitting up from her bed. Observing the moonlit night from her window, she felt a mixture of emotions. Time has gone by and tomorrow is the wedding, she thought. Standing on the balcony, she noted the unusually bright moon. Acknowledging some bitter feelings, Lucia resolved not to harbor regrets regardless of what unfolded in the future, as she have already done enough regretting in her dreams. She expresses her determination to move forward without looking back, having learned from past experience. Lucia had never considered Vivian Hesse as her name since the end of her 5-year marriage with Count Metten in her dreams. She had lived as Lucia since then, but now she had to resume her life as Vivian because of her wedding, as she signed the wedding certificate. Vivian Hesse Hugo Taran, she heard the priest pronounce after they signed the marriage certificate. I now pronounce you husband and wife. As they rode back to Taran's manor in the carriage, Lucia couldn't help but gaze at the setting sun, though it was only noon. The wedding had been a simplified, informal ceremony, consisting only of signing the certificate. Distracted by her thoughts, Lucia observed Duke Hugo shuffling through files. She had no regrets about the ceremony, but she pondered the absence of the traditional kiss that seals vows, recalling they had only kissed twice before and his lips were soft. Tomorrow, he said, bringing her back to reality. Yes, she replied, blushing. Duke Hugo, unaware of her inner turmoil, advised her not to shout. Oh no, I hope he didn't notice I was staring at his lips, she thought, trying to conceal her blush. Overwhelmed by emotions, she listened as Duke Hugo informed her of his departure to the north the next morning, suggesting she could stay in the capital if she wanted. Stunned, Lucia asked, "Excuse me? What did you just—" Her speech was interrupted by the Duke explaining that the north was a boring place compared to the capital, suggesting she didn't need to accompany him. I will be staying for at least 2 years, Duke Hugo informed Lucia. In response, Lucia was taken aback. Oh, she mumbled, processing the unexpected turn of events. She contemplated staying in the capital, grappling with the reality of her new life as Vivian Hesse and the uncertainty that lay ahead. For a brief moment, excitement flickered within Lucia, only to be replaced by subdued disappointment. We just became husband and wife after signing the certificate, and Duke Hugo already wants to live separately, Lucia mused to herself, realizing the marriage held little significance for him beyond formality and necessity. It was something that had to be done regardless of who the bride was. Why did I expect anything different? Lucia chided herself silently. Despite the fleeting excitement, she knew deep down that her union with Duke Hugo was more of an obligation than a heartfelt connection. Summoning courage, Lucia decided to express her willingness to accompany him. I will go with you, she told the Duke as she chided herself not to expect anything, who remained engrossed in his files. But if your excellency wishes for me to stay in the capital, I will, she added, trying not to get her hopes up. Duke Hugo, without looking up, cautioned her to be prepared for the worst, then resumed his work. As the journey continued, Lucia realized she had developed a headache. The stress of the situation seemed to weigh heavily on her. Upon reaching the manor, a butler welcomed her. With a smile, he introduced himself as Jerome, the Duke's servant. Lucia couldn't help but express her delight. A pleasure to meet you, Jerome. The cookies you gave me last time were delicious, she exclaimed, recalling his talent for baking. Jerome was taken aback at first, before he graciously thanked her, assuring her that she could speak freely to him. However, Lucia, trying to maintain a semblance of formality, declined, stating that she was comfortable as it was. Lucia apologized if her manner of speaking went against the Taran family rules. No need to worry, my lady. You make the rules of the Taran family, Jerome assured her politely. He inquired whether she would like to eat first, rest, or be shown around the manor. Ugh, Lucia exclaimed, rubbing her head. Concerned, Jerome called out to her, but Lucia dismissed it as nothing. Deep down, she wondered why her migraine persisted. I would like to get some rest, Lucia finally decided, and Jerome offered to guide the new Duchess to her bedroom. After a bath, Lucia rested on her bed, pondering her exhaustion. All I did today was get married, why am I so tired, she wondered aloud. Well, I guess marriage is a big task, she thought. Recalling Duke Hugo's indifferent demeanor upon arriving at the Taran manor, she mused about the significance of marriage. Just for a little while, Lucia told herself before drifting off to sleep, confident that she would feel better upon waking and be her normal self. Awakening to a handmaiden's call, the handmaiden suggested having dinner before returning to sleep. Lucia asked how long she had slept, and she was told she had slept for 6 hours. Surprisingly, her migraine had disappeared. The handmaiden told her they were preparing dinner and offered to show her to the dining room. Curious about Duke Hugo, Lucia asked if he had eaten. The handmaiden revealed that he usually dined in his office when occupied with work, leaving her speechless. "So that means I'm having dinner alone?" Lucia thought, not thrilled with the idea. When Lucia finished her meal, she graciously thanked the handmaiden before embarking on a leisurely stroll around Taran's manor. Duke Hugo's absence at their wedding dinner puzzled her, and she couldn't help but feel a simmering anger. "We're under the same roof, is it too much to ask?" Lucia muttered, struggling to contain her frustration. She paused, reminding herself of her vow not to raise her expectations. "I said I wouldn't get my hopes up, so why am I disappointed?" Shielding her eyes from the sunlight, Lucia reassured herself that this was what she had anticipated, reminding herself of the secure home she now had for life. Interrupting her thoughts, a voice called out, offering to give Lucia a tour of the manor. Accepting the offer, Lucia and Jerome began their exploration. During their journey, Jerome cautioned the new Duchess to be careful on the stairs, hinting at the vastness of the manor, making it seemingly impossible to complete the tour. Curious about the history of Taran's manor, Lucia inquired whether the mansion had always belonged to the Taran family. Jerome revealed that it hasn't, as the family had acquired the residence only a few years ago, having previously not owned property in the capital. "Who lived here before that? Such grand houses and gardens must have belonged to a high nobleman or a wealthy person," she asked. To Lucia's surprise, Jerome disclosed that many people had lived here before, and the Tarans had purchased 100 houses, demolishing everything except the main mansion. The revelation left Lucia realizing that the Taran family was wealthier than she had initially thought, gaining a deeper understanding of their wealth. "If you have any more questions, feel free to ask me," Jerome said, acknowledging her curiosity about the handmaidens who attended to her. When Jerome inquired if anything was amiss, Lucia assured him that it was not a matter of wrongdoing. Expressing her curiosity, she questioned Jerome about the handmaiden assigned to her, remarking that she seemed more mature and experienced for such a role. Lucia asked if there was a specific reason behind the choice. Jerome apologized for not clarifying earlier and explained that the handmaidens with her were designated for the one-night stay, while those in the Northern Territory would tend to her during her stay there. She asked if the handmaidens here had homes and couldn't leave, prompting Jerome to reply in the affirmative, and she asked about the fate of those accompanying her to the lands. Jerome informed her that the traveling handmaidens would perform tasks according to their age differences. Grasping the situation, Lucia felt at ease and thanked Jerome for the explanation. Jerome, in turn, held Lucia in high regard as a lady of the house. As night fell, the handmaiden offered to apply flower oil to Lucia's skin, believed to enhance its smoothness. Lucia found herself in her room with her handmaiden, thinking, flower oil? While the handmaiden worked, Lucia couldn't help but wonder if Duke Hugo would visit her that night, as she hadn't seen him since their arrival. Contemplating the situation, she reasoned that he might not feel the need to be present, given that he already had a designated heir in his son. Lucia speculated that the marriage was primarily for securing the heir's position, and it was wiser to eliminate any chance of her becoming pregnant. Lying on her bed, Lucia concluded that it was better this way. Despite her promise not to fall in love, she couldn't deny the racing of her heart at even the slightest kiss. "It's better to keep our distance," Lucia thought to herself, considering the consequences of going beyond mere kissing. Blushing and stumbling over her words, she abruptly jolted up from the bed, realizing she needed to divert her thoughts. Gazing at a peculiar painting on the wall, she pondered her duties as the Duchess. Social gatherings were not her forte, unlike the idealized Duchess she had dreamt about. Recalling her dreams, Lucia exclaimed, "That woman." Wondering about the fate of the woman who was supposed to become the Duchess, she questioned what had become of her since Lucia had married Duke Taran. Realizing the futility of dwelling on such matters, Lucia understood the harsh reality of her world and acknowledged that the marriage was essential for her survival. Noticing wine on the table, Lucia decided to celebrate her successful marriage with just one glass. However, she unwittingly finished the entire bottle, leaving her inebriated. Regretting her excessive indulgence, she felt hot and thirsty. contemplating whether to undress. She reasoned that she had the bedroom to herself, and as the orchestrator of a changed future, she justified the impulse to strip down to her underwear. Now liberated, Lucia decided to hydrate herself with water in her sober moments. Unbeknownst to her, Duke Hugo entered the room in his night robe, finding his wife unexpectedly undressed. Perplexed, he stood there, silently observing the scene, leaving her stunned. As Duke Hugo entered the room, he was taken aback to find his Duchess, Lucia, unclothed. Startled, Lucia exclaimed, "Duke Hugo. Why is he here?" she thought as she inadvertently dropped the cup she held, which shattered on the floor at her feet as she flinched. Concerned, Duke Hugo quickly ordered Lucia not to move. Approaching her cautiously, he gently lifted her into his arms, a gesture that caused Lucia's cheeks to flush with embarrassment. Again, he is carrying me without asking me, she thought as Duke Hugo approached the bed. Once he had placed Lucia on the bed, Duke Hugo inquired about any potential injuries. Lucia reassured him that she was unharmed and promptly covered herself with a bedsheet, still visibly embarrassed as her heart raced. Duke Hugo looked at her and couldn't help but comment on the irony, noting that Lucia had welcomed him in the nude and was now feeling self-conscious. In response, Lucia defended herself, explaining that Duke Hugo's unexpected presence had caught her off guard, as she had not anticipated his arrival. Duke Hugo, looking a bit perplexed, asserted that it was his bedroom and he had every right to be there. Lucia, shocked and mortified, revealed that the butler, Jerome, had instructed her to sleep in this room without specifying it was Duke Hugo's private chamber. Is it also the Taran family tradition for husband and wife to share chambers, she asked. The Duke, realizing Jerome's likely involvement, acknowledged a miscommunication. Well, don't get the wrong idea, she said. As Duke Hugo questioned Lucia about her habit of sleeping without clothes, she clarified that it was an exception due to feeling overly warm. Duke Hugo, surveying the room, noticed an empty wine bottle on the floor, prompting him to inquire about Lucia's alcohol consumption. Confirming his suspicion, Lucia admitted to having indulged in some wine. Upon realizing that she had consumed Duke Hugo's wine without permission, Lucia felt a pang of guilt. Duke Hugo, observing her flushed demeanor, remarked sarcastically, "Getting drunk, taking your clothes off, and waiting for me in my bedroom. What a convenient coincidence," making her flushed. Defending herself, Lucia insisted that she had been unaware the room belonged to Duke Hugo, emphasizing that she hadn't anticipated his arrival. She expressed doubt that every woman desired him and pondered silently about the Duke's perceived self-importance. Asserting herself, she mentioned that even if that was what she was doing, she has the right, granting her a unique privilege as she has signed a contract. Duke Hugo, still observing her, remained silent. Lucia, realizing her abrupt tone, and wondered if he doesn't tolerate people talking back to him. He apologized for his presumptions, leaving her stunned as he quickly apologized again, contemplating whether he should kneel in remorse. Surprisingly, Lucia responded, "No, I was caught off guard." Lucia, looking down, accepted his explanation. However, she couldn't help but express her surprise at the Duke's apology, as she had perceived him as someone who never apologized. Duke Hugo questioned her perception, wondering if it was influenced by rumors. Lucia clarified that her judgment was solely based on her observations and feelings. She admitted to expecting him to be commanding rather than apologetic. Duke Hugo, turning his face away, acknowledged, "No one has said such harsh words to my face before." Lucia defended her words as merely her opinion, not intending to be harsh. "Please don't condemn me for that," Lucia pleaded. The tension lingered in the room as the Duke and Lucia grappled with the unexpected turn of events and the honesty that unfolded between them. The Duke raised his eyes to match that of Lucia. He found himself captivated and thought, those eyes again, those earnest, unwavering eyes. She was like this from the start. Her offer was absurd, but I ended up accepting it because I was drawn to those eyes. I just couldn't look away from this genuine and determined woman. Silent and still fixated on Lucia's eyes, Duke Hugo leaned towards her. He said, "Now then," as she flinched. Since you are the only woman who has the right to jump into my bed, why did you not think I would come to you? It is our wedding night after all, he said as he removed the bed sheet covering her. He left her unclothed. Lucia thought, that's... As she contemplated their next steps, Lucia was acutely aware that their union lacked the spark of love, and she didn't possess the conventional allure of beauty or voluptuousness. Moreover, she knew that Duke Hugo harbored no desire for further children. You mentioned your immediate departure for the territories tomorrow, she cautiously inquired, mindful of the delicate nature of their conversation. Duke Hugo, speechless at first, assured Lucia that nothing would happen without her consent. Lucia, maintaining her calm demeanor, softly explained that she couldn't say no on their wedding night. Duke Hugo, marveling at her adherence to rules in the heat of the moment, questioned if she would refuse under different circumstances. Lucia replied, that depends on how tonight goes. Duke Hugo warned her about the consequences of starting something intimate, emphasizing the difficulty of stopping once begun. He asked if she was ready, noting her apparent fragility. Lucia hesitated, her thoughts flashing back to her unsettling dreams of her wedding night with Count Metten. Trembling slightly, she remembered the horrors of that dream and how it scarred her perception of this moment. It's not a matter of being ready, she said as she raised her hand, placing her palm on his chest, expressing her desire to avoid conflict. With seductive glistening eyes, she thought, I'm not scared. With this man by my side. The room hung in suspense as the Duke and Lucia navigated the complexities of their wedding night. Duke Hugo gently kissed her hand before exploring her with tender kisses all over. He bit her and she screamed lustfully. Your Excellency? Lucia exclaimed as she blocked him from exploring further, but he insisted she call his name and abandon formalities in this intimate moment. Pardon, she said. I don't want to be called Your Excellency in bed too. Just call me by my name, Duke Hugo asserted. Your name? Lucia questioned, feigning ignorance. Pausing his affectionate gestures, Duke Hugo inquired, don't tell me you don't know my name. No. I do, Lucia replied in a startled manner, hesitantly whispering, Hugh, looking at him with a seductive look. A glimmer flickered in Duke Hugo's eyes, leaving her stunned. I think I just saw a glimmer of something in his eyes, she thought. Oh, or just Hugo, Lucia suggested, but Duke Hugo preferred the endearing nickname she had given him. I like the other one, he remarked. Excuse me, she asked, confused. I like what you said before better, he remarked. Hugh, she called out softly as Duke Hugo removed his robe, observing her expression. Duke Hugo responded, Vivian, as she flinched, halting him from progressing. Surprised, Lucia blushed as she said awkwardly, no one calls me by my name. Well, you'll hear it often from now on, Duke Hugo assured her. Vivian, he called once more as he smiled at her, eliciting a blush from Lucia. As Duke Hugo just stared at her, Lucia expressed her nervousness by clenching her hands to her chest. You know you're quite stubborn, right? He remarked. When was I ever stubborn? Lucia retorted. Just now, Duke Hugo stated with a smirk. Lucia, attempting to divert the conversation, said, You like to argue, don't you? I don't argue because I'm always right, the Duke asserted before capturing her lips in a passionate kiss, momentarily forgetting the tension between them as they both stared into each other lustfully. In a tender moment of intimacy, Duke Hugo guided Lucia as they shared passionate kisses. You have to breathe with your nose. Wrap your arms around my neck, he instructed, to which she complied. Playfully teasing to set the mood, he whispered, Relax. If it's not your first time, it will only sting a little, he reassured. What if it's my first time, she asked. Lucia, overwhelmed by emotions, trembled as the encounter intensified, his kisses planting sensations all over her skin. Relax, he murmured, kissing her hand tenderly. What? She asked, confusion lacing her voice. Momentarily distracted, he thrust into her, causing her to scream as pain shot through her. She clung on to Duke Hugo as their movements synchronized with the rhythm of the sheets. Pausing briefly, Duke Hugo soothed her, whispering, I haven't even gotten started yet. What? Lucia asked before being engulfed in a rush of sensations. This time, the experience was swifter and more intense. Duke Hugo marveled at the overwhelming pleasure, pondering whether it was a result of his prolonged abstinence or if Lucia was indeed extraordinary. Every time I touch her, my body screams with pleasure. Her scent, her soft skin, her voice, everything about her makes me dizzy with desire. Her touch, breath seemed to electrify him, igniting a longing for a union that, deep in his heart, he believed should have occurred with her long ago. Thank you for joining us on this incredible adventure. If you enjoyed what you watched, please consider liking, subscribing, and ringing that notification bell. Your comments mean the world to us and help us improve. The next episode promises even more excitement and unexpected twists, so stay tuned as we embark on this thrilling journey together. Keep the anticipation alive, and we'll catch you in the next episode.